Hello everyone, my name is Harry Baldock, editor at Total Telecom, and today I'm here with Ian Taylor and Dr. Elizabeth Newman-Earl at the VX Fibre offices in Guildford to discuss the fascinating topic of developing smart cities. Ian, Elizabeth, thanks so much for speaking to me today. It's great to be here.
Real pleasure, thank you.
So I guess first things first, what should be the overall objectives for a smart city in your opinion?
Well, I think I'm going to focus primarily on the social side of things. It's making the city more efficient, it's making the city more livable for the people who live there, and it's also driving change for the municipalities or for the councils. And I think they're all tied into one. Obviously, it's got to be enhanced and facilitated by the infrastructure, but it's about what it means to live in a city and how you future-proof that city going forward. So it's all well and good putting big ideas in, but they've got to be grounded, they've got to be needed by the community, they've got to be needed by the citizens, and the municipality need to understand what are those drivers and ambitions of the people who live in that city and how they can drive those forward.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think most local authorities, municipalities focus on those things: social, economic, environmental, and from our experience, the economic pressures and drivers are usually the ones that will see the success being driven out. So, local authorities are trying to grow their own local economy, their GVA. So ultimately, we're obviously looking to both try and save money, clearly, but also, make sure that the local economy is growing and growing well, because that again has a massive impact on the social and lived experience of the citizens. So I think it's a lot about focus on the economic outcomes primarily, alongside hoping to drive social change and environmental outcomes along the way.
It creates that inclusivity, and the tech enables that. So you can't have a smart city without the clever tech. And it's about how do you then create that layering within the city space, so you have the infrastructure running underneath it, and then you have the gains and the aims of both the municipality and all of the stakeholders within the city. And it's about bringing everybody together, so it's creating that table or boardroom environment where everyone can participate.
And there's clearly a lot of benefits associated with becoming a smart city, but at the same time, I guess it's quite a daunting process for a lot of people. How do you think a municipal stakeholder should kind of organise themselves at the start of this journey?
It's all about co-design and engagement, and if you spend any time with me, you realise they are my two favourite words, because you can't design something that is enabling or it is relevant to the community if you don't have that community's voice. But you've also got to have the stakeholders, the tech companies, the councils, everybody who's going to invest into this design and this future proofing. They've all got to be around the table, they've all got to listen. And so you can start with small scale ambition, so a really small part of smarting up a city and what that then means, and using the data and pushing that data into future design. But it can't work in isolation. It's all got to be participatory, so participatory planning, participating data gathering as well. And it just cannot be citizens working in isolation or the municipality working in isolation. And we have retreated into that. There is a lot of apathy within society today. So how do you go back almost, David Cameron's big society and bring it together and bring people together for the good of themselves going forward and the good of the city? Because arguably you want to set down roots in the place that you live or have children, and how do you do that without engaging in that place?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you need to, I think brand is often useful. So we do quite a lot of work with the City of Stoke-on-Trent. They've taken the idea of Silicon Stoke and put a brand around that. It gives people focus and an identity to see as central to the outcomes and objectives for the city on a digital basis. But that's a very broad church, if you will, very broad school of stakeholders. And it's important to ensure, as Elizabeth was saying, that it's not just about the technology stakeholders, it's also about those people who are stakeholders in social and environmental outcomes, and stakeholders in maybe education and training, and by bringing those people together and ensuring that they see positive benefit to what you're doing in the smart city, then it becomes just one plank of an overall digital strategy for the city. And again, it's about not making it a techie's dream world. It's about actually making sure people understand that they are the stakeholders and it's to their benefit, and that's why they're engaging.
And I think convincing people of that is one of the big challenges, because then how do you measure a smart city? What would be the best way for a smart city's benefits to be measured in a way that's going to convince these stakeholders to take part?
Absolutely. You have to ensure that the outcomes are indeed measurable, and that those things are sometimes very difficult to achieve. So in the early stages, I would always say, make sure you're picking on those outcomes that are measurable. You've got a baseline. You understand what maybe your current CCTV and Safer Streets program costs you. Let's look at transforming that into something that's more affordable by maybe looking at a more inclusive and aggregated approach to those sensors or to those platforms and those data gathering mechanisms. You can then basically say, right, well, we've saved this much money and we've also driven these outcomes and these changes. Those cameras might be, I don't know, implementing a clean air zone, so we can measure the level of particulates today, and we can then say we've driven down the risk of asthma in our city by reducing particulates in these environments. And unless you can actually take those measurements and empirically show them against the benchmark, you're setting yourself up to fail. I think you do need to measure and demonstrate those outcomes.
But the benchmarks have to have relevance. So exactly, as a mother of a child who had asthma, for example, there's a clear tangible benefit to that data set. And a lot of companies and a lot of people get very excited about data for data point, almost being busy for busy's sake. The data has to have a relevance. So again, it's coming back to what is impactful and what the starting line is or the baseline is. And that can only be decided collaboratively together. And so rather than just putting a bit of policy here or a bit of infrastructure there, it's that thoughtful public policy as a starting point. And we were talking about this when we were discussing that having this discussion was about, you can't go big too soon. Start really small, demonstrate those tangible benefits so that the council and all the stakeholders and all the investors into this space can really see the tangible benefits that are coming out. And then you can start to roll out those programs. But then it's also using the tech. So the CCTV might start off with the safer streets, but then it's going to dust particles and pollution particles and onwards and onwards. So you're not having to reinvent the wheel. But the data has got to be understandable. I'm not a tech person and I'm not a scientist, so that tech and the data has to talk to me as a citizen, as an individual. So it's about engaging with the various stakeholders and understanding what counts for them and then making it translatable so they can take it in and then move forward with the project and the plan, because if it doesn't make sense then people will just not be interested to support and continue with that endeavour.
I think it's a really great point that you really need to focus heavily on getting the individual, the personal out of the data and not just make everything into numbers that people can't engage with. But because at the end of the day all of the citizens are going to be the central part of this. How do you remain engaged with stakeholders, especially the citizens in these would-be smart cities?
And that's a really hard question, and working a lot within community projects, there's a lot of, let's get excited about this, and then, it's going to take a couple of years, and then the interest drops off. So it's about maintaining that presence, it's being involved within the community, setting up your community champions and your stakeholders, and also within the municipality or within councils, we work to quite short political cycles, so it's taking it out of the political, making it, a city-wide or a town-wide project that everybody can get behind. So it's citizen governance almost, rather than it being a top-down approach. It's very much an inclusive, collaborative project, and then you can look at participatory planning and all these big buzzwords, which is about driving the future of cities forward. That it's not just dependent on those who sit in City Hall. It's about everybody participating together, I suppose, and you really saw that in the project in Stoke about bringing people into the mix.
Absolutely. I think local authorities arguably look like they're set up to fail. At the end of the day, you would probably only engage with your local authority if you had a problem. If something was wrong, something was broken, the bin wasn't collected, there's a pothole and what have you. You've got to try and find ways of rebalancing that narrative, and by engaging better with the citizens and making them the stakeholders in the outcomes, their feedback can necessarily be more positive. We're not looking for a utopia, we're not suggesting that we're going to, there's a silver bullet in a smart city to solve all the ills, but you can ultimately rebalance that positivity and drive an agenda of change, demonstrate that change is occurring, but make sure that the change is demonstrable, and the local authority is not the person trumpeting that so much. It's actually the stakeholders, it's actually the citizens. When they say, this municipality is a great place to live, You know, we've got clean air, we've got cycle lanes, we've got safe streets. You know, we've got all the things that make a lived experience better. Then I think that's when you get sustainability, because it's ultimately about that engagement and driving forward that momentum.
It sounds like it's really about collaboration, starting small, and getting meaningful results that you can really convey to people. But there's obviously going to be a lot of challenges in line as well. What do you think are the kind of the main pitfalls for municipalities when they're going through this process?
I think ultimately people look at smart cities as that panacea, and oftentimes it's, you know, it's very much the data scientists that are often seen as the main drivers and stakeholders. At the outset of a smart city, it's a bit of a data desert really, and if you think you're going to find, you know, insights in that data that maybe were, you know, previously unrevealed, then that's a problem. You know, you're going to find yourself not be able to deliver those outcomes. You know, as you say, start small. Look at the things you can measure, look at the things that you know are wrong at the moment, look at how that technology in the smart city can change it, measure that change and promote that change for the, you know, for the benefit of the citizens. You know, but don't be too obsessed by this data lake that you're going to create and find all sorts of insights that are going to change people's lives. I think that's a misnomer. I think you have to drive change, not for change's sake, but for the benefits of the citizens, demonstrating how that's actually had an impact on their lives.
I would agree, and I suppose that I would extend it. It's about understanding who the city is for, who the plans are for, and to work through that as a process of design and delivery. It's also being slightly hesitant with regards to data. You know, there's nuance within data at different times of the day, especially if you're collecting data from sensors and also asking citizens to push data in. You'd have gendered data depending on who's using the city at what particular time. So there's all of those nuances to have, and as we were talking about, or as Ian said, it's not having a big data lake. It's about that small scale. So really focusing on key areas, and that's where you need to do your research and your planning before you just go bold with a big idea. We're going to do this, and then hope it all falls into place. So the research, which I find hugely exciting, isn't the sexy side of things, but it's about how you plan for the future and making sure that there is a relevance and continually sense check, and not being sort of caught by your own petard, as it was, you know, making sure you know that what you're doing has a relevance, and being bold enough to admit, actually, this route isn't right. Let's go down this route, because from what the data is showing us, actually, this is where there is an interest, and making sure that the infrastructure is in place and making sure that it can be sustained, because the worst thing is you have a smart city and then all the traffic lights fail because of an infrastructure or a tech problem. So it's got to go hand in hand with really positive infrastructure build and development, as well as making sure that what you are delivering has a relevance to those you're delivering it to.
Yeah, I mean, the data will come. And once that data does start to arrive, you know, that's when it can get really interesting, because ultimately, you know, you are collecting data from sensors, and at that point, you know, it's not about, you shouldn't be afraid to fail. There might not be insights in that data, but there very well might be. It might be that maybe there's an outcomes agenda that says we want to change the journey types across the city. We want people to walk more. We want people to cycle more. Well, again, it's very difficult to establish that baseline if you haven't actually got the data to start with, right? So, you know, but until you've got that sensor infrastructure and the data is in, you know, you do have this data desert, as I've described it. Once you get that data, then of course it builds. You build that momentum. So, you know, I think that the data is important, but don't be too reliant too early. And as we've said, try and do those things that will drive change for positive outcomes in their society, in the citizen society.
It's a really fascinating time for smart cities. I'm really looking forward to seeing how the landscape develops. Ian, Elizabeth, thank you so much for sharing your insights with me today.
No worries, thank you.
Real pleasure, thank you.